They're going to try and put on the best show they can for you. Once there were two ducks, Mr. and Mrs. Mallard. They were in search of a place to live. They flew over many beautiful places, but each time that Mr. Mallard saw what looked like the perfect place to build a home, Mrs. Mallard would say it was no good.
This place is not safe enough to raise a family.
So the ducks kept searching. Finally, they arrived in Boston. They flew over the Boston Commons, saw the lovely pond and open fields.
Why don't we make this our home?
So the ducks spent the night in the beautiful gardens. The next morning, the ducks woke up and decided to fish for some breakfast in the pond. But there were no fish. Just as their stomachs started growling, a policewoman named Michelle walked over and tossed some delicious peanuts to the ducks.
Yummy, be better than this. Let's make this our home.
Just then, a girl on a bike came whizzing past, almost running over poor Mr. Mallard.
This place is not safe enough to raise a family.
So the ducks took off again in search of a quieter home. As they flew, they finally came to the Charles River. They spotted a small island in the middle of the river that didn't seem to have any animals or people on it.
Let's make this our home.
So the ducks had finally found a home. And just in time too, because Mr. and Mrs. Mallard laid eggs, and just a short while later, 6 adorable ducklings were hatched. Jack, Cat, Black, Mac, Knack, and Quack. One day, Mr. Mallard decided it would be a good idea to fly down the river and see what the rest of the city was like.
I'll fly around and meet you in the public gardens and I'll be safe. You too.
And with that, Mr. Mallard was off on his journey, leaving Mrs. Mallard to take care of the ducklings. Mrs. Mallard taught them how to swim, dive, walk in a line, come when they were called, and most importantly, how to avoid bicycles, scooters, and other things with wheels. One day, when she thought they were ready, Mrs. Mallard decided it was time to head to the Boston Commons to meet up with Mr. Mallard. Just like that, Jack, Cat, Black, Mac, Knack, and Quack got into their line right behind their mother. The group started towards the Commons. They swam from their island to the bank of the river. Once they waded out of the water, they began waddling and came to a road with lots of cars driving on it. Mrs. Mallard stepped into the road. Honk honk with the cars! Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings quacked as loud as they could, but the cars just kept coming. It caused such a loud commotion that policewoman Michelle and her partner came running to help. They waved their hands and walked into the middle of the street to stop the cars. Then they waited for the ducklings to cross.
Here you go, little one. Be careful on the rest of the river.
As soon as the ducks crossed the busy road, they started walking down the sidewalk in front of lots of stores and restaurants. People walking down the street started to stop and stare at the line of ducks making their way through the city. Many were shocked to see such a sight.
Look at the line of ducks. What are they doing? There are so many little ducklings. Where could they all be going? What are they doing here?
Soon the line of ducks finally reached the gates of the common. Mrs. Mallard and all of her ducklings, Jack, Cat, Black, Mac, and Quack, were so thankful to all of their human friends that they began quacking to show their appreciation. The pond in the middle of the commons. Just as they did, they saw Mr. Mallard waiting there for him like he had promised.
You will never imagine the trip that I've been on and what I've seen. I think we have an idea.
Mrs. Mallard smiled and all the ducklings began quacking from excitement.
Quack, 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 quack.
What an adventure it is to live in such an exciting place like Boston. The end. Think about